Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your host, Patrick James Lynch. We are at the BDC opening session in Atlanta, Georgia. I just told
2024
that it is the year 2024, and I just voluntold Dr. Mike Recht, is it Chief Science Officer? Is that the title?
Chief Medical and Science Officer.
Copy, Chief Medical and Science Officer. What did you think of that opening session?
It was a really wonderful opening session. All the different people that came and performed and spoke to us. The boy choir was unbelievable.
What? What's that?
How Phil Gattone, our new president and CEO, found a boys choir to sing a song that is the theme of the entire conference shows what a leader he is.
Well played. It was also great to meet his friend Greg.
Great to meet his friend Greg,
brings
who
a
we
tremendous
all
amount.
know from all the different things he's been in.
And is willing to lend his name, his network, his energy to our community. And you could see how people really perked up for that. Like, it
That's
created
right.
quite an energy in the room.
I thought what was so interesting to me was his real understanding of his power. And how he's like, well, I'm a celebrity, but I am not the hero. But we can bring some people that are really going to move things forward for us.
Yeah, and his unwillingness to accept no for an answer.
Yeah,
I really
exactly.
like that.
Exactly.
So what is, before I let you go from this thing that you were roped into, what are you focused on during the meeting over the next few days?
So the BDC is a super interesting conference to me, right? I'm used to going to scientific meetings where I meet with collaborators and I learn the latest, present some of the research that I'm doing. The BDC is different because of the presence of the people with hemophilia, our lived experience experts, the family members, and really I'm at that point in my career where I have people coming up to me who are now 30 or 40 years old, and as a pediatric hematologist, I'm like, oh, wow, it is so good to see you, and so good to see you thriving. So seeing the families, seeing the moms and dads who I've met, when I was giving the diagnosis to whatever bleeding disorders, that's a really great thing for me. And then, all the educational sessions here. Yeah. It's what makes BDC so special.
Absolutely.
The networking is important, the reporting on the science is important, but it's really being able to talk to our entire community all in one place.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, thanks for doing this with us.
My pleasure.
See you around the campus.
Actually, you never have to ask me, Patrick. I'm always there for you.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, we're now going to go try to steal a couple of minutes with CEO and President Phil Gattone. They've shut the lights off on us. They're trying to get us out of this room. All right, I'm traveling over. Excuse me, you're all good. All right, Phil, here's your mic. We're rolling
Patrick.
Already.
Great.
Just
Great
got
to be with you.
A couple of comments from Mike Recht, giving us his perspective.
Oh, terrific.
What did you think? Here, let's move over here where it's not the
Sure.
pitch black.
Right.
As
Sure.
beautiful of a visual as that probably was creating. How are you feeling? Let's start there. How are you feeling?
I feel really fortunate, really blessed, and really happy.
Yeah.
I feel like we executed on what we had envisioned, and there's so many things that can go a little bit differently than you plan.
Of course.
And so I'm just pleased with the turnout. We had a good turnout, and all the things we hoped would happen at the opening session seemed to come through the way that we had intended. So the Georgia Boy Choir was
incredible,
really wonderful. Greg Grumberg taking the time to come out here was great, and our guest speakers all were just spectacular. So I feel like we were able to deliver on a promise to people when they come to BDC. They have expectations of NBDF, and it's nice to be able to meet those. So I'm feeling really happy right now and really warmly welcomed.
And you mentioned this morning too, you had a meet the CEO session. Can you share a little bit about what that was?
Sure. We, as an organization, I think it's important for people who are involved in leadership across our network to get to know me and for me to get to know them. So I wanted to share just a little bit about my background, a little bit about my vision, And it was really wonderful to spend some time with those executives. And when I shared that my vision really centers on building community and strengthening our community, I think that the chapters appreciated it because that's where their heart is. That's where they really feel the difference can be made. And so I think the definition of community is what's really changing. So it's geographic, but it's also digital. It's also people are getting their supportive care, they're getting their information, their education from different avenues now. Instead of just talking to their friend at the coffee shop, they're able to talk to their friend in Australia or in Japan about things. And so the whole culture is shifting, but there's really nothing like being together. And so my vision is that we can build and strengthen the geographic community and really enhance the digital community. And I feel like if we can do both of those things, then we're on the right track. And I feel like my personal story of having a child with a chronic illness and understanding some of the really difficult decisions that have to be made as a caregiver or as an individual with a health condition, I think there was an appreciation for that, and it was a mutual appreciation because I know many of the people in our chapter network have been personally impacted by bleeding disorders, and so it's very personal to them. There's a great passion, and so I felt like there was a lot of mutual respect between colleagues.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, you bring such a generous spirit, and you come from a lived experience. You are an expert on what it means to care for someone with a health condition that impacts all aspects of life, and that's the red thread that connects this community to the epilepsy community and so many others.
Well, I agree, and as far as the connection, I feel like this community, in a way, adopted me. They decided to adopt me because I come from outside the bleeding disorders community, but I do feel really warmly welcomed, and for that I'm so grateful.
Well, I'm so grateful that you took a couple of minutes to do this, so that we can deliver to the audience Friday morning a little texture from opening session at BDC. I know we're keeping you from something. So just last question is, with all that's going on over the next few days, what are you particularly either most excited about, focused on, or what's on top of mind for you?
Well, for me, it's really about relationships, and I've had a chance to meet some people kind of superficially on a Zoom meeting or on a Microsoft Teams meeting, but I haven't really had a chance. Yeah, really.
Love a good Teams meeting.
I haven't been able to really meet them in person and just sit with them for a few minutes and really get to know them. So for me, I'm looking forward to the next 2-3 days of really engaging with people, building relationships, listening to what they have to say, listening to what's important to them, because that helps shape our direction. I feel like the theme of this get together at BDC is the power of one voice. And when people speak up and speak out and use their voice, it can really be impactful, and there's a lot of power behind that. So I want to listen to what people have to say, and that is going to help shape our future at NBDF. So I encourage everybody to just come say hello and to talk to each other and say hi to me, and we'll have a good time together.
And hashtag BDC 2024 for those at home to see what's going on social media.
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks for all you're doing for our community.
Well, thank you. All right, get some rest.
Will do.
Perfect.
All right, man.
Thanks for doing that. Hello, and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I'm your patient, advocate, and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your nonprofit nerd and other host, Amy Bradford. We're going Amy Bradford today, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
I think I can get it right this whole episode. Let's see how I do.
I don't know if I'll get it right. I did a flub last time we had an episode. Anyway, great times.
I have more to say, but I'm going to keep going with our opening, which includes letting you know that on today's show, Janet Brewer,
yes,
founder, CEO of Chess, is joining us to talk about their One Drop Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium on November 1st through the 3rd. That's coming up, as well as the latest from our gene therapy segment. We discuss hemophilia treatment centers and the massive operational readiness to administer gene therapy with Zack Duffy and Roland Lamy from the Hemophilia Alliance. Amy Bradford, we've got all that and more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Hey, y'all, if you like what you hear, please share this episode with your network. You can also share breakout content from today's episode as it's released on Bloodstream Media's social media channels. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to those baby podcasts.
Good for your health. The Bloodstream Podcast subscription. And I might add, it is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right, Takeda. Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes, Amy Bradford, in a world free of bleeds. And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. I wonder how many jingles I've turned this into in the last
I know.
100 years. You can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, that is bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say, thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda.
Well, Amy Bradford, there it is. There it is. That's what happened. Didn't take long, what was that? We've been recording for 3 minutes? Cool. All right. Before we jump into it, anything you want to share with the listeners?
No, I think we should get right into it. We have a juicy episode this week.
Well, in that case, then, on to my conversation with Chess's Janet Brewer.
This next segment is brought to you by Genentech. If you are living with a bleeding disorder like Hemophilia A, staying active may be important to you. Genentech gets it, and they're excited to help you connect with their team and the vibrant community of people living with Hemophilia A. Genentech offers one-on-one support from experts and provides resources where you can hear real stories from people living with hemophilia, learn about events you can go to, and discover how the hemophilia community manages physical activity with a bleeding disorder. Everyone's experience is different, but there's no substitute for the support of a community that truly understands life with Hemophilia A. To meet members of the community and to hear more about their Hemophilia A journey, head over to www.hemophiliacommunity.com.
All right, Bloodstream listeners, I am now joined by Janet Brewer. She is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of the Chess Foundation, and she's joining Bloodstream today because in November 1st to the 3rd, the Chess Foundation is hosting the One Drop Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium. This is an important community event each year, so we wanted to talk about that here today in the same episode that we're releasing during another important community event, the Bleeding Disorders Conference. But let's switch gears and talk about Chess's One Drop Consortium. Firstly, Janet, hello, welcome, and how are you?
I'm great, Patrick. It's really great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Always a pleasure. So what first motivated Chess to organize this meeting for people specifically with rare bleeding disorders? And how do you see the meeting addressing the gaps that exist in support and information for people with rare bleeding disorders?
Back when the inhibitor summits were still going on, the Factor VII community was invited to attend them because there were some similarities in terms of the products that they were using. But that's almost where the similarities ended. And it was wonderful for us to be able to meet so many Factor VII community members at the time. And then in 2012, there was a change in terms of the attendance for the inhibitor summits, and Factor VII patients were no longer in attendance at that event. So we knew that it left a significant gap in the community because they were receiving some support and education that they typically had not had any real kind of education or support at the time. So we advocated hard with our legacy sponsor, Novo Nordisk, to make this program a reality. So from 2012 until 2019, it was the F7 retreat, dedicated predominantly to the Factor VII community. And then in 2019, we opened it up to the Glanzmann's thrombocythemia community. And then in 2020, we merged the two of them to incorporate all ultra-rare factor disorders and all ultra-rare platelet disorders, to create an inclusive environment for a significant piece of the population that is, sometimes I think the word's overused, but we in a marginalized community that didn't have access to sometimes and still an accurate diagnosis, care, and treatment for their bleeding disorders. So it's truly been a privilege for us. We're now in I think this will be our 13th conference for this community. And it's their conference. It's their BDC, honestly.
Well, you mentioned the inclusiveness, this large umbrella of communities. So we're talking about, like you said, Glanzmann's and factor 7, but factor 1 deficiency, 2, 5, 10, 11, 13, platelet disorders. So with all of that inclusivity from a programming perspective, how do you ensure that the content of the meeting is relevant and valuable for the patients, the caregivers, and the other stakeholders, given that there's a lot of diversity within the populations that you're serving?
That's a great question. And one of the really unique things about programming is you try something and you see if it works. And it's been through the collaboration of our patient families who have continued to tell us what it is that they need and what it is that they want. So one of the things that we always make certain to happen is that there's a separate session for individuals that are affected by platelet disorders, and then there's a separate session with a separate physician for individuals that are affected by factor disorders. And that made a significant difference in our understanding, because although we all know the one thing that unifies us as this bleeding disorders community is that we all bleed. That's kind of our constant, isn't it? But we all bleed different. And even amongst people with hemophilia, we bleed differently. So it is very different for the ultra rare community. So we work very hard at listening to their voices, at what they have to tell us. And we tell them all the time, this is your program. It's not Chess's program. It's the community's program. And we need your input in order to tell us how to make it better for you.
And this year's One Drop Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium, again, takes place November 1st through the 3rd in Tampa, Florida. You can learn more by visiting chess.education/1drop. Chess.education is the website. Janet, can you share some of the key topics or sessions that will be taking place this year, along with why they are important and timely?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, we have separate sessions for ultra rare, separate sessions for our platelet disorders. But one constant there are several constants that we have for this program that we've historically honored since we started, is there is always an OBGYN session. Reproductive health is so important, as we know, for women. That's something that Chess has always supported with our Ladybugs program, with our Hemophilia initiative, with our Hermanas de Sangre programs. But we want to make certain that women's voices are heard in terms of what they need for reproductive health. In the Glanzmann's thrombasthenia community, multiple factor 7 patients that we know, many women are never able to carry a child to term. There's a significant number of miscarriages. There's a significant number of individuals who have had their menstrual cycle suppressed because it's just not safe for them to have a child or even a menstrual cycle. So that is something that will always remain in the forefront of our programming for One Drop. Another session that we feel is very important is self-infusion. You know what? That's something that we take for granted in the Hemophilia A, Hemophilia B community. We have multiple products now that don't even require an infusion anymore, but that's not the case for individuals with factor disorders or platelet disorders. And even still, for some of our platelet disorder community, they still need to go to the hospital in order to have a platelet transfusion or treatment. So that's always an important skill that we feel needs to be taught, and how much better improves your life if you don't have to go to the hospital to do that. As we all know, we know that hemophilia is a better understood bleeding disorder. Start trying to explain that you have factor 7 deficiency, or you have Glanzmann's thrombocythemia deficiency, or you have Bernard-Soulier, when you're looking at something that's a 1 in a million or a 1 in 500,000 incidence. The emergency rooms just don't really understand that. And then the other topic that is always part of a CHESS program is mental health. How does this affect your daily life? How does it change what it is that you do, how you go about navigating your day? How do bleeds, change the rhythm of your life, not only for yourself, but for your child, your partner? How does it affect your work? How does it affect your school? How does it affect your relationships? So those are important conversations for us to continue to have. We know how important that is in this community. So that's kind of a staple. And then we also will have an insurance session, which we're coming into a new administration. We know that there's so many changes occurring. So those are some of the things that we feel are very important and will always remain part of the One Drop program.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned as part of that answer the importance of women's voices. And I want to ask you about the role that patient stories or patient experiences, the lived experience experts, what roles do patient stories and experiences play in the consortium, and how do you incorporate those voices into the programming?
Their voices they're the direction. That's the only way we know how to programmatically design this program, is it has to be their voice. I don't live with Glanzmann's thrombocythemia. I don't live with a rare factor deficiency. I'm very familiar in hemophilia A world, and I'm very familiar in inhibitor world, but those aren't my experiences. Their experience are not mine. They're the lived experience experts, and they're the ones that tell us what it is that they want. We don't have a committee that says this is how we're going to guide this session or this program. It's their voices. We still evaluate with a very old-fashioned pen and paper model because we feel like it gives us the best information at the time. They are able to fill that out during the session to say, this is what hit me here. This I didn't feel it was as important. But when we ask them, what topics do you want to see in a future program? How can we improve this for you? That's when we get some real raw data in terms of what's the most important to them.
I love that response. It is the direction. So one more question. Again, we're talking about the One Drop Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium, November 1st through the 3rd at the Tampa Marriott in Tampa, Florida. And Janet, thanks for the time. How do you envision this particular meeting? CHESS does a lot for the community, but thinking about this particular Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium, how do you envision this meeting this year and in the years to come contributing to the broader conversation about rare bleeding disorders? And what impact do you hope the meeting will have on future research, advocacy, and care?
Really glad you asked that, Patrick, because we've been working on a couple of initiatives for the last year with Athen to be able to incorporate more families, more individuals within the Athen data sets to make certain that, and we're still working out all of the details because who knew that this would be this complicated. But that's why we kind of started early, and we continue to work with Athen and Dr. Singleton and a significant group of other physicians to potentially have bloods drawn at the One Drop program to include their data into the Athen data set. So many of our patients haven't necessarily been able to access that. There's been some confusion about whether AF10 is going to continue, whether it isn't. And we knew that this was very important to our patient community. I remember the very first time we started this program in 2012, I had several participants come up to me, extend their arm and say, "Take my blood." I'm like, well, I can take it, but I don't know what to do with it. So give me a little time and we'll figure this out. And we did have Dr. Diane Nugent from 2017 to 2019 start a registry of ultra-rare patients. We collected over 300 blood samples to start thinking about how at the time it was mostly factor 7 patients, but we know that factor 7 patients don't bleed according to their levels. And until we have more information and more studies that we can continue to provide that information so that HTC providers understand that, yeah, you know what, it may look like they have normal factor 7 levels, but their bleeding doesn't match that. It doesn't match in factor 13 as well. So our goal is to continue to be able to provide research opportunities to be able to get these families and these individuals involved in either AF10 or the GT module or AF Transcends. We're also really excited to be able to work with the Miami Hemophilia Treatment Center to bring what they call the WUP study, the Women's Ultrasound Project, to One Drop so that we can evaluate the joints of women ages 18 to 20 to determine what level of joint deterioration they all have. Until we start looking at this, we're not going to know. And we all know that we need that data in order to continue to drive research, understanding, better care, better treatment, and better diagnosis. So we're pretty excited about this, and please keep your fingers crossed that we can make this a reality.
Absolutely, that would be tremendous. So just one more time, it's the Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium called One Drop from the Chest Foundation, taking place November 1 through 3 at the Tampa Marriott Airport in Tampa, Florida. For more information, visit chesses.education. Janet Brewer, co-founder, CEO. Thanks for joining me to talk a little bit about One Drop, and I look forward to hearing about how it went on the other side.
Thank you, Patrick. Look forward to seeing you at BDC. Appreciate the opportunity.
So Amy, you led this next segment, the latest in our installment on gene therapy. There's a specific hemophilia treatment center focus that we talked about up at the top of the show. Can you give us a little bit more of the lay of the land? What are we about to listen to here?
Sure. We've got 2 members of the Hemophilia Alliance with us to talk how HTCs are prepping and how they really are operationally running full steam to administer gene therapy. It's a really cool conversation.
I am personally looking forward to it. So let's give it a listen.
We're back, folks, with another It's a Whole New World gene therapy segment. You know, throughout the year, we have discussed the science behind gene therapy. We've talked about the differences between hemophilia A and hemophilia B gene therapy. We've even heard the story of the first patient commercially dosed with Hemgenix. But today we're going to focus on HTCs. Our hemophilia treatment centers are the epicenter of care in the bleeding disorder space, and now with the introduction of gene therapy treatments, they are more critical than ever before. HTCs have been planning for this new world of gene therapy administration for a while, but now, since gene therapy for both hemophilia A and hemophilia B are commercially available, our HTCs are operationally more prepared than ever to administer this new treatment. So today, we have the pleasure of welcoming 2 members of the Hemophilia Alliance on the segment. If those of you that don't know, the Hemophilia Alliance is a non-for-profit organization that comprises of all of our federally funded hemophilia treatment centers, or, of course, HTCs. The purpose of the Alliance is to promote the common interests of our member HTCs. In addition to providing support through advocacy, they provide expertise and organizational support in the following areas: operations, payer relations, contract pharmacy, regulatory compliance, and legal updates that affect their practices. Today, we welcome Roland Lamy, who is the Vice President of Member and Community Relations at the Alliance, and Zack Duffy, the Director of Member and Community Relations for the Hemophilia Alliance. And we're going to talk all about HTCs. This segment is brought to you by CSLBehring, a global biotherapeutics leader focused on serving the rare disease community by providing innovative therapies. They now have a first-of-its-kind treatment for hemophilia B. To learn more about this treatment option, visit beyondhemb.com and download the B Support app from the App Store or Google Play to stay up to date on relevant information and manage your treatment journey.
Before I joined the Hemophilia Alliance, I was actually able to start working on what gene therapy was going to look like at a hemophilia treatment center. There's a lot of things that need to happen internally, operationally, right, to be ready to give a patient gene therapy. Not just how do we receive a drug and how do we infuse it, but what does the clinical care look like? How do we ensure that someone receiving this drug pre-post receives that quality clinical care moving forward? And it does look different than a patient receiving medication on a monthly basis or treating a bleed. So it sort of is rethinking both the operational component, the clinical component, and then how do you work with your partners and all of that. So, and partners is a broad term, right? Payer partners, institutional partners, if you work at a treatment center within a broader institution, working with your community members, and of course your patients. So there's just there was a lot going on, continues to be a lot going on for hemophilia treatment centers to figure that out, to provide the best care possible.
I think our initial assumption going in was that a lot of the patients that might want this have resourced it through the trial process before. I thought that the uptake was going to be reasonably slow. It's been a little slow in terms of patient acceptance or outreach to gain access to the treatment. But we are working through. It seems to be picking up more recently in terms of patient interest and provider readiness to provide the services. And we've been navigating through several issues in the insurance realm that just are still maturing relative to gene therapy. Things like, traditional prior auth processes that say, yeah, this is medically necessary, but it's not a guarantee of payment. You will most certainly find variation in state laws around the definition of medical necessity. I think there's just sort of a general view of a layperson's view of medical necessity, treating a condition that you have, and particularly as it relates to a pharmaceutical product. Is it treating and indicated for the condition that you have, and is it appropriate medical care? But you're going to see a lot of variation in response to that question, and I think everybody struggles with it. You see it in provider contracts, you see it in master plan documents and certificate of benefits, and almost never does the language perfectly align, unfortunately. Well, that's a bit of a problem for a provider that has to outlay a significant cost to drugs. So we're trying to help our treatment center members navigate through these things. And I think we are learning along this process, along this path. But I think also providers and insurers are kind of learning as we go through it as well. I mean, remember, this is a reasonably narrow population for a particular disease state relative to gene therapy. So it's been one step at a time, and I think there's been a little bit of learning on all ends at each case that we've been intersecting with.
Yeah, I think treatment centers are deciding how they want to do this and how they want to move forward. I think a lot of treatment centers are moving forward with they want to do it in-house, right? They want to be able to purchase the drug, infuse their patient, and do the follow-up care. There's some hemophilia treatment centers out there that have decided that maybe they don't have the infrastructure for that, but they may want to work with another hemophilia treatment center to do the infusion. So making sure that they're following the patient at their clinic as they normally would, and then maybe they would go to another hemophilia treatment center to receive that infusion, and maybe that immediate post-infusion follow-up, and then that patient would transfer back to their home clinic. So sometimes we call that the hub and spoke model. So the hub being the place of the infusion, and then the spoke being that home hemophilia treatment center.
I think Zack is right. There's a lot of complexity to the breadth of services that are necessary to be ready to deliver this therapy.
Behind the scenes mechanics of payment for gene therapy that maybe slowed things down in the beginning. And then I also think there's a lot of education going out to patients. Treatment centers are prepared and ready. They've been talking to each other to figure out, best practices. I think from the payer level, we're starting to see better consistency amongst the payers around policy and what a single case agreement might look like or payment terms might look like. And so it has been a slow roll. We definitely do see it increasing moving into the future now. And I think part of it is just this is such a different product than other products that have come to market, right? So it's not just a factor product that can be stored in your refrigerator and you infuse on maybe a semi-similar cadence. It's not an injection. There's a lot of labs that are needed. There's a lot of follow-up that's needed. So, it's not just a light switch that turned on. It definitely kind of required some building of the plane to get it before we're flying it. And so I think that's where we're there now, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's education. It has been a little bit of a wait and see. I think if you sort of remove the kids for a moment and you think about the remainder of the population, there's definitely a population that seems to be eager, but cautiously eager, waiting to sort of see what gets reported in terms of outcomes. And then there's, an older population. I have a colleague who over his life has gone through changes to products pretty routinely when he was younger. Now that he's older, he's very stable on a product, and he's sort of like, I'm not sure I want to put myself through another change. Some of them didn't go so well. And so, there's just, I think, different viewpoints in the population. And as sort of Zack said, I think there's a sweet spot in the population of people that are very, very eager for this, that are, again, still sort of learning, maybe don't want to surface and say, hey, I need to understand if my product is covered. Who are they going to go to? They're certainly not probably eager to call their human resources department and say, is my $3 million drug covered? So I think it's just really an educational issue. And the more experience we have, the more patients that sort of roll through it, I think it'll continue to pick up. This population is more educated about their disease state than maybe any population in my career in healthcare. This is a new thing. And, there are things that, are provided, master plan documents, and, you can call your insurer directly. I would say that Zack sort of alluded to it earlier, that the best probably avenue and resource is going to be, the provider, the social worker at the hemophilia treatment center, those that can really get at the questions, provide evidence of medical necessity that the criteria are met for this patient to get treatment, and have a legitimate conversation with a health plan medical director or whomever it might be.
I think when you look at the hemophilia population, we know approximately the number of people in the U.S. with hemophilia A or B. There's a lot of gene therapy products coming to market in a lot of broader populations. And we are sort of the first to kind of figure this out on the outpatient side, right?
We're on the cusp of lots of gene therapy treatments in different disease states. And our insurance system, our healthcare system, our public payer system is going to have to find a way to fund these things and appropriately fund them, and look for ways, whether it's creating the old reinsurance pools or high risk pools or those kinds of things, to spread this cost over a greater population, subsidize it in a way. I mean, these are amazing treatments. For some people, they're life-changing treatments. they're going to occur in other areas. It isn't just hemophilia. It's going to happen in cancer. It's going to happen probably in dementia and Alzheimer's patients. And so who are we to prevent this? This is like exciting advances in medicine that people deserve. And so we have to find a way as a healthcare system, collectively, everybody, find a way to finance it and make these things continue to be available to patients.
Thank you, Zack. Thank you, Roland. Once again, this segment has been brought to you by CSLBehring, which now has a first-of-its-kind hemophilia B treatment. Visit beyondhemb.com or download the B Support app wherever you get your apps for more information.
Thank you, Zack and Roland, for participating in that gene therapy segment. Thank you, Janet, for the great conversation about the Rare Bleeding Disorders Consortium coming up in November. Thank you to Phil Gattone and whoever else future me may have spoken to at the BDC at the top of this episode. And thank you to Takeda, our presenting sponsor, bleedingdisorders.com, and segment supporter, CSLBehring. All these years in, Bloodstream Podcast would not be able to do what we do without the support from you all. So thank you for that support. Amy Bradford, September 27th is our next episode, rounding out Q3 of 2024 somehow. What's up on our next episode?
We've got CEO Anita Brickman. She's going to be back to highlight International Plasma Awareness Week, which is awesome. She was actually in studio, so that's going to be a fantastic interview. And we have a brand new host for the I'm Fine segment. You're going to have to tune in just to check it out to see who it is. I'm not even going to float. I'm not even going to float it.
She's not even going to float it, not float it, which could have been a hint and may still be, but you will have to wait and see until next time. With that, that is all for this episode. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing. Reach out to us on social media. Mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com if you love emails. If you're at the BDC, I hope we saw you there. Until next time, I'm your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Bradford.
Which we're all still getting used to. Take self-care of yourselves. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.